Welcome, everybody. We have our special guest, Gareth, returning to the show, and I'm super excited to talk with him. It's been a few months since we've had Gareth on the show. Gareth and I shared similar views over a year ago, where we were both like, hey, there's going to be a pretty large crash coming to the Bitcoin space, the crypto space. A lot of people probably doubted Gareth. They definitely doubted me. We had a big drop. And what's beautiful is when we got near the bottom, or what's been the bottom so far, Gareth and I differed in opinions, which I absolutely love. I love to hear somebody's take that's different than mine. And honestly, I don't know what Gareth has to share with us today, but I'm curious what his targets are. Is his target still 12K? Does he think the bottom is in, the bottom's not in? And then this global recession that's supposed to happen this year, what's his thoughts on that? All of that and more coming in this episode. Gareth, welcome to the channel. It's great to have you back.
Oh, it's so good to be back. And yeah, I love our conversations. I love how we kind of coincided with our call there and then kind of differing. I think differing opinions give the viewers the ability to make up their own mind.
Absolutely. Well, I would love to start with short term for Bitcoin. What are you seeing in the charts? What are you looking at? What's your take on Bitcoin as we speak?
Yeah, so in the short term, yesterday was a very, very important day from a technical standpoint. And what we saw yesterday was a follow through from the previous big up day. And then what we saw was we touched the 25,000 level, actually piercing it. And then the negative was the reversal, right? So I think any technician looks at that and says, okay, that's a topping tail, that's a reversal day. You have to be a little bit careful if you're a Bitcoin bull when you see that type of price action, because essentially what it means is you saw this massive amount of euphoria, FOMO with retail investors in Bitcoin buying in. And then we saw somehow a reversal of epic proportion, which again, wasn't the small investor selling all of a sudden, right? I mean, the small investor's not saying, oh, 25 is the top here. It's usually the bigger money. And so when you see bigger money unloading, you have to pay attention to that. And so at this point, that's a top, right? Now, again, can tops be violated? Can they be broken? Absolutely. But I never want to jump the gun. I want it to prove itself before I go on that side. So right now, you have a top at around 25,300 on Bitcoin. And unless that gets taken out with a daily close, you have to respect that as a short-term top. Near term, I do expect Bitcoin to come back in, and even over the midterm, I still think there's trouble brewing in the crypto market. So I'm not a person that thinks the lows are in yet. I know that may sound crazy to a lot of investors in Bitcoin after this big run, but again, I would just draw my attention. If I zoom out on this chart, this is a great bounce, nothing to take away from it. But in the scheme of the move and in the scheme of the bear market, we have to keep in mind that by no means are we back above major technical levels. Like 25,000 is a technical level. It's a mid-level one. But to be honest, I'll show you to where the big one is. The big one is at 30,000 right here. And the reason why psychologically this is a big level is because this was your mid-period of the 2021 bull market, right? This was the low pivot right here. So basically, I'm saying to myself is that if for me to be convinced that the lows are in on Bitcoin, we need to trade above, not just for a day, but I want to see it hold above for a little while above 30,000. And then I would say, okay, the lows are in. But until that, I think this could be a bear market rug pull rally, and I would be very careful.
I would be cautious in the short term as well. I think from what I see, we share the same view short term. Where we differ is potentially where the low could be. I like your idea of the 30,000. I definitely support that as being very wise in terms of viewers that are watching and they're really looking for something more sure. That is definitely the technical level that you should watch. Now, when you mentioned that the lows aren't in yet, where are you thinking? Is 12K still sort of a target? Are you thinking below 10? What are you thinking in terms of your target for Bitcoin?
Yeah, so as of now, I do think we do take out the lows of, I think it was around 15,700, and we probably head down to 12 to 13. I still am in the camp that we have to have max pain in the crypto market. So you're probably talking about a Pierce of 10 to achieve that. That would be where most retail would probably really panic and consider dumping their bags, if you will. So I'm still in that camp. I think the driving force isn't going to be another FTX. Like, I'm not really envisioning that there's going to be a ton more of these major fraud scenarios. The way we get to that lower target is probably with a macro recession, right? So if we think about it, we know that the Fed, and even yesterday we heard from Fed presidents that they were going to likely raise rates further. We saw the PPI numbers are still very hot. And so they're going to keep interest rates high for a long period, at least the entire year. It's very hard for me to imagine that Bitcoin and the stock market can withstand that. And more importantly, that the economy can withstand that. So at some point we slip into a recession. If that's the case, the S&P probably has another 25% down at least. And if the S&P drops 25%, the question you have to ask is, how does Bitcoin fare during that period, right? So for me, I got to imagine that Bitcoin would at least drop. I mean, just to get back to the lows, we drop about 8,000 to 9,000, right in that vicinity. And then the question is, do we go even lower with the S&P collapsing that much? And I think we do. I think that that's the next sell. So you had the first phase of this bear market, which was kind of the bankruptcies and everything like that. You'll see some of that continue if we go down to the levels that I say. But I think that the big driving force won't be unregulated crypto. I think the regulations are coming. It's going to be more the macro environment where people get very, very risk adverse.
I agree with your premise. I'm with you on everything you said. The only thing that really gets to me is two things. Number one, the Bitcoin charts. The ones that I've studied in the past are saying like, hey, the bottom could be in. I get it from the macro perspective, global recession, interest rates. There's all these issues that have to play out. It has to be shaken out. What makes me nervous is that the high majority of people the past 4, 5, 6 months have been saying, 2023 is going to be devastating. The top economists on planet Earth, not 50-50, not 70-30. It's like almost all of the top economists are saying that. And that makes me nervous, Gareth. What is your take on the high majority of the highly intelligent people all saying the same thing, which gets the average investor saying the same thing? What's your take on that?
Yeah, and you're 100% right? So we had this scenario where coming into 2023, it was initially the first half is going to be horrendous, and then I heard about a recovery in the second half. Well, we've obviously seen the jobs numbers be amazing, and the economy is holding up in the first half, and we're already, we're not at the end of the first quarter yet, but we're not too far away. So now you're seeing it shift, and I think so you're already proving some of those people wrong, and you're right. When the majority says something, it's usually not the case. So the question is, are they going to kind of just continue to shift down the pike, if you will, to kind of push that into the second half? And that's where I am. I'm in the second half camp where I think the first half remains strong. I think the economy, again, remains strong. But I think the second half is where we start to see weakness. And then I also see that it's going to drag into 2024. So I think a lot of these economists that are saying this are just early to the punch. I think they're ultimately going to be right, but a lot of them will question themselves. Like listen, we all do, right? I've been in many, many trades where it goes against me. I'm like, wait a minute, was my thesis incorrect here? And that's just the nature of trading and analyzing and stuff like that. So that's where I am. One of the things that I'll point out too, which has me nervous about Bitcoin for 2024 is everyone is saying that it's going to start rallying into the halving, right? And that makes me very nervous that everyone is anticipating that, especially when you have totally different scenarios where you don't have the Fed printing money, you don't have interest rates near zero like they've been for the last so long, right? So there's like these things like you're mentioning about that when everyone's saying something that gets me a little bit nervous.
Yeah, for me, in my channel, we don't focus too much on the halving. We just focus on the facts and the charts and what's right in front of us. The halving is more like news events for me personally. But what I see from my side, which I think coincides from what I heard from you, right now at this 25.3K or so, we've got some bearish divergence that's been forming for about a month. Each higher high we've made, our indicators are making lower highs at the same time. Obviously, bearish divergence over a month is nothing to play with. We had some bullish divergence forming over about 6 months, which is why we saw this rally form. Obviously, 6 months or bullish divergence would be a lot stronger. But what's your take on the charts indicating that we could have already seen a bottom? Do you think there's any possibility that we've seen a bottom so far in Bitcoin?
Yeah, I do think there's that possibility, right? I mean, every good trader will always say, okay, this is my thesis, and there might be a 70 to 80% chance that that's correct. But remember, that leaves 20 to 30% that you could be wrong. So there's absolutely that thesis that means we could have a bottom in place. For me, it's the charts again. If you look back even at 2017, that there was this secondary dip that we saw back down to the 3,500 level before we really took off. So at least we went back to double bottom back in, I think it was 2009, early 2019 maybe, when we did that. But again, there's this this need to go back and retrace at least to those lows and kind of retest it, right? And that's kind of, at least in the very least, what I think has to happen. But for me, it's like, you look at the landscape in crypto, and I still can't get my head around how so many coins could still survive through this kind of flushing period, right? It just doesn't, if this is the low, then all these coins are going to survive and everyone's going to become zillionaires again. And that's not the way these markets work. And again, I can reckon back to the dot-com era and watching what happened. I mean, there were so many dot-com companies that were junk, but they got these crazy valuations. But then when the flush came, they actually did get wiped out. They got wiped out, or they got bought out for pennies on the dollar. And we haven't really seen that in crypto yet. We've seen some bankruptcies, we've seen FTX, but it's not the flush out that notes, for me, bottoms. The other thing I would say too is, I don't know how much you guys pay attention to the sentiment indicator, but to me, I follow Twitter very closely. I follow social media closely for that analysis on what the human condition is telling us. What's the majority telling us? And I don't know if you've seen how much bullishness has been out there. But if you go back to lows in almost any market, in a bear market, when you get that first 30% bounce, most people are so fearful that they don't even believe it's going to go up. They're like, this can't be the bottom, because I've been fooled too many times. And here you see people like, oh, this is 100% the bottom. And that makes me nervous. I'm just like, something's wrong here.
I hear you on that. I don't know about the sentiment on Twitter. I don't use Twitter a lot for that. But I get what you're saying. I read the comments a lot on our YouTube videos, and that helps me understand the pulse of the community. And from what I've gathered, yeah, people are getting too bullish on this run, but there's bearish divergence that's been forming for a month. There's nothing, you can't play with bearish divergence. It's only a matter of time before we see lower prices from where we're at now. But I think for me, and let me get your take on this, Gareth. For me, in the way I'm studying the charts, my honest opinion is that the bottom could very well be in that the top of this next bull run, it doesn't have a chance to reach 100K, which I know everyone's going to be really pissed about, but that's just what I see. Who knows if it's right or wrong? We have no idea. But what do you believe about this next bull run? Whenever it's going to happen, in your opinion, do you think it's going to be something that we've seen in cycles past? Do you think that these cycles are weakening? I don't know if you've seen my 5.3 theory. Let me give you the 10-second premise. If you take the bottom to the top percentage-wise in each cycle, and divide that by 5.3, it's the exact percentage gain of the next cycle. And if you take the bottom of the next cycle to the top of the next cycle, that percentage divided by 5.3, it's the exact percentage of the following cycle. And it's been happening in Bitcoin's history. Nobody's talked about it. Cool. I found it kind of by accident with some mathematical formulas, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And if you use that, it says that the top is going to be less than 90K. Which would freak everybody out. It's not a normal cycle. What's your take on that premise?
I mean, so like you, I'm a chart guy, right? So the first thing I would do is I would go to the charts and I say, okay, if we take the high from 2017 and we draw a line through here, we connect these last two high pivots. That would be, I mean, so to me, that's a trend line that I would pay attention to. And if we did get up there, that would probably be a shortable trading opportunity. Now, the question is how, again, it's hard to see where that is. Right now, if we went straight up to that level, it's only around 75,000. And that would be the case if we went, a year out. It probably isn't above 100 yet. So if we go up, if we enter a new bull market, I think you're on the right track there, where I don't know what that number would coincide with that formula, but it would be interesting to see, and you might be able to run this, is does this trend line, let's say we hit that bull market in a year, does it coincide with that trend line sloping up on the charts? But I think that's fascinating. And I can see that. I mean, as Bitcoin gets bigger, right, it's gonna be harder for it to go up as much, right? So you have the law of large numbers. You're not going to see Apple go up 10% a day anymore. Whereas a billion-dollar company, it could do that no problem. You don't see that anymore when it's a $3 trillion or $2 trillion company. So I think that has to be taken into account, and that you will start to see smaller bull cycles. But again, they will be bull cycles, no doubt about it.
Let me get you out of here on this, Gareth. What about the idea, because I'm always looking at scenarios that are not popular, scenarios that we all know once the bull run starts, people are going to be going, it sounds like they're going crazy already from what you've told me. It's very plausible that Bitcoin will have trouble where we've already had a double top. We had a double top, around 68, call it 68, right? It's very plausible that Bitcoin goes on a run and has a triple top, and it could very well go sideways for multiple cycles, similar to what the stock market has been doing. Every 25 years, it'll go sideways for a decade. And that would be the flush out that you're looking for, where almost everybody would go bankrupt. All of these crap coins would be gone. It would be devastating. People would give up. And it would just be the healthiest thing that's ever happened to Bitcoin. What's your take on that?
I love that premise, because that's something that I've even said about the stock market recently, that we probably will make new all-time highs for 10 to 15 years. And again, there's a lot of proof in history that does happen after these crazy moves. For instance, the NASDAQ.com bubble took 15 years for the NASDAQ to make a new high. If you look at the Chinese stock market, if you look at the Brazilian stock market, they still haven't made new all-time highs since 2007, 2008. And so again, when you get these meteoric rises, there's a tendency for it to need, think about it like this. You run a marathon, right? And none of us are marathon runners. You're not getting up the next day and running another marathon. You and I are probably going to need like a month of rest.
I would be dead.
So, yeah, exactly, right? So you have to look at it like that, where you have to take that time to digest that move. And I'm in full force with that. That type of action would absolutely flush out the crap. The crap couldn't survive without constant gains to the upside.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on with the comparison to the .com bubble and what we saw there. It's very similar, right? The stock market right now and is obviously a lot healthier because of that. If we didn't have that, it would be horrific. Crypto needs it. We haven't had one of these long, drawn-out cycles where it doesn't act as it did in the prior cycles. We've obviously seen a lot of companies go bankrupt, but yeah, time will tell. And I would love to have you back on the show in a few months, and we'll discuss what we see happening. Hopefully it's above this 30K, and we can talk about what your thoughts are there. But you never know. It could be the triple top cycle. It could be a long multiple cycle range bound where people start to give up. But this is crypto. It's always exciting and a pleasure to have you. Gareth of verifiedinvestingcrypto.com. Go check out his website, also inthemoneystocks.com. Gareth is a legend. Go follow him on Twitter as well. Gareth, thank you for coming on the show. Do you want to know when to buy and when to sell? Click this video right now.